Hello. Before we begin tonight's slow journey, I invite you to settle in. Let your shoulders loosen, let your breath soften, and let your mind drift gently away from the weight of the day. Tonight, we are traveling into the quiet heart of the Middle Ages, to a world tucked beneath layers of snow and silence. A world where winter shaped every moment, every meal, every step, and every breath. This isn't a tale of battles or kings. It is the soft story of ordinary people facing long nights, silent roads, frozen rivers, and the gentle endurance that carried them from one season into the next. As you listen, there is nothing to remember, nothing to focus on. Just let the calm, slow rhythm guide you. Feel the cold medieval winter settle around you. Not harsh, but peaceful, like a distant memory wrapped in wool and firelight. Whenever you're ready, we'll step quietly into the medieval snow. Long before winter fully arrived, medieval people watched the seasons change with quiet attention. Leaves began to curl and fall from oak and chestnut trees, covering the ground in soft layers of brown and gold. Farmers felt the shift in the air long before the first snow. Daylight shortened, winds sharpened, and the smell of earth turned colder. They prepared in the only way they knew, slowly, patiently, predictably. Families gathered the last apples from orchards, dried herbs in bundles hanging from rafters, and stored grain in wooden barrels sealed with wax. Children collected fallen branches for kindling, piling them beside cottages made of wattle and daub. As nights grew longer, hearth fires became the center of life. People sat close, repairing tools by faint firelight, whispering stories, and listening to the crackling of burning wood. Winter was not sudden. It drifted in like a heavy blanket, soft but inevitable. And across villages, the first frost settling on roofs marked the beginning of a long, slow season, one that shaped every aspect of medieval survival. Preparation for winter was a months-long ritual. Farmers inspected their thatched roofs for leaks and patched gaps with fresh straw. Livestock were moved closer to the village, their shelters reinforced with extra timber. Pigs were fed heavily during autumn to ensure enough fat for the winter. Women cleaned large clay jars for storing preserved vegetables and salted meats. Herbalists collected plants believed to protect families against winter illnesses: thyme, sage, rosemary, tying them in small bundles hung above doors and windows. Water barrels were covered to keep them from freezing too quickly. Paths between homes were cleared and marked with stones for visibility in snow. People checked their modest clothing: wool cloaks for men, layered linen shifts for women, patched gloves, and hoods for children. During these preparations, the village hummed with quiet cooperation. Neighbors helped repair fences or shared spare wood. Winter was too powerful for any one person. Only together could they face months of cold nights and limited daylight. When evenings settled early, families gathered inside, listening to the wind push gently against the shutters. Winter was coming, but they had done what they could. The first snowfall always arrived silently, flakes drifting down from a gray sky, landing softly on fields and rooftops. Children watched in fascination, pressing their faces to small windows. Adults, however, observed with a mix of respect and unease. Snow meant beauty, but also hardship. It muffled all sound, turning villages into hushed landscapes of white. Footsteps became slow, careful impressions on narrow pathways. Smoke from hearths rose straight into cold, still air. Farmers checked their animals frequently, brushing snow from their backs and ensuring their water bins had not frozen solid. The world outside grew quiet, making everyday noises, crackling fires, wooden bowls placed on tables, whispers inside cottages, feel louder and more intimate. Snow-covered fields that once bustled with activity, reminding everyone that work outdoors was now limited. Even the village church sounded different. The bells seemed softer, their echoes absorbed by the thick blanket of snow. The first snowfall marked the shift from preparation to endurance. Winter had fully arrived. Most winter life happened indoors. Medieval homes were small, usually a single room shared by an entire family. The hearth was the heart of the house, its warmth reaching only a few steps away. People slept close together for heat, wrapped in wool blankets and furs. Frost sometimes crept along the inside of walls, forming delicate patterns in the night. Mornings began slowly. Someone stirred the fire from embers left overnight, blowing gently to coax back a flame. Breakfast was simple: warm porridge, stale bread softened in broth, or dried fruit saved from autumn. Children helped grind grain with hand-turned mills, while adults mended tools, spun wool, or carved wooden utensils. Light came mostly from the fire. Candles were precious and used sparingly. Outside, the world remained still and white. Inside, the rhythms of winter unfolded quietly. Every day looked similar, but routine brought comfort. Families told stories, recited prayers, or hummed old songs. Winter was a test of patience as much as a test of survival. Food during winter was predictable but limited. Fresh vegetables were rare, so families relied on what they had preserved. Salted pork hung from the beams, smoked fish wrapped in cloth, turnips stored in cellars, onions braided into long strings. Bread was made from coarse flour, often mixed with oats or barley when wheat was scarce. Meals were warm but repetitive. Stews simmered slowly in iron pots suspended over the hearth, flavored with whatever herbs were available. Honey sweetened dishes when supplies allowed, though it was saved for special days. Dairy products were scarce, since cows produced little milk in the cold months. Hunger was a constant concern. Families rationed carefully, stretching supplies to last until spring. Children were taught not to waste crumbs. Even festivals were quieter, with simpler meals and smaller gatherings. Yet the act of eating together brought warmth to winter days. Shared bowls, shared fires, shared stories. These small comforts helped families endure the long, cold season with quiet resilience. Winter days in medieval villages passed with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Work never stopped completely. It simply shifted indoors. Men repaired farm tools, sharpening sickles and patching wooden handles. They shaped new plows for the coming spring, smoothing each piece of timber by hand. Women spun wool into thread, their fingers red and stiff from the cold despite sitting close to the hearth. The spinning wheel creaked softly, blending with the crackle of burning wood. Children sorted dried beans or helped card wool, their small hands learning skills they would use lifelong. Occasionally, families worked together to make candles from tallow. The smell was strong, but the light was precious. Even the village carpenter stayed busy, fixing broken stools or crafting simple storage chests. Outside, the cold pressed against walls and windows, but inside each home there was a gentle hum of activity. People worked slowly, quietly, without hurry. Winter had a way of stretching time. Hours passed with the steady rhythm of simple tasks, and though the world outside was frozen and silent, the small sounds of daily labor gave homes a feeling of life and continuity. Staying warm during a medieval winter was an ongoing challenge. Firewood was precious and had to be rationed carefully. Families burned the hardest, slowest logs at night so the fire would last until morning. Children gathered fallen branches near forests when weather allowed, though snow often hid everything beneath thick layers. Cloaks were worn even indoors, and everyone slept close together on straw mattresses covered in wool blankets. Sometimes frost formed on the inside of windows, delicate and shimmering. People placed cloth over gaps in walls or stuffed moss into cracks near the roof. The hearth provided heat, but its warmth rarely reached far. Outlying corners of the home remained cold, and breath often showed in the chilly air. Still, people endured with quiet resilience. They warmed their hands over bowls of hot broth, sat with their backs close to the fire, and shared furs on the floor. Winter taught patience, reminding everyone that comfort was temporary and had to be carefully preserved. Animals were vital to survival, so caring for them during winter was a major responsibility. Livestock shelters were simple, wooden beams, thatched roofs, walls stuffed with straw for insulation. Farmers checked animals morning and evening, brushing snow off their backs and ensuring they had enough hay to last through the night. Water troughs froze frequently, forcing people to break ice with wooden mallets. Cows were let outside only briefly to stretch stiff legs. Chickens stayed close to their coops, small fire, or huddled together for warmth. Sheep, with their thick wool, handled the cold better but still needed shelter during storms. Horses were brushed carefully to prevent illness, and their stalls were lined with fresh straw. Even dogs and cats found warm corners inside homes or barns. Taking care of animals meant taking care of the family's future. Milk, wool, eggs, and meat all depended on keeping livestock healthy through winter. Despite the cold and the difficulty of the work, medieval villagers approached this task with steady determination, knowing that spring's survival depended on endurance now. Roads that were busy in warmer months became nearly deserted. Snow muffled every sound, turning paths into quiet, white corridors. Travelers were rare. Only essential journeys were attempted. Messengers delivering news between villages trudged slowly, leaving narrow footprints that filled quickly with drifting snow. Wooden carts were almost impossible to move, wheels sinking deep and freezing solid. Bridges iced over, making crossings dangerous. Merchants waited for spring, and distant markets felt farther than ever. Within the village, people walked carefully along packed snow trails, marked by branches or small stones. Dogs barked less, birds fell silent, and even the wind seemed tired. The world felt hushed, as if holding its breath. This winter quiet was both peaceful and unsettling. Without the usual sounds, creaking carts, talking travelers, distant bells, villagers became more aware of their own footsteps and the rustling of their cloaks. Winter narrowed the world to only what could be reached on foot, yet the silence brought a strange calm, as if nature itself had paused to rest. Illnesses were more common in winter, and medieval families relied on simple remedies. Herbalists prepared infusions with mint, sage, or chamomile, believing these plants strengthened the body. Honey was added to soothe sore throats, though it was used sparingly. For fevers, people wrapped the sick in extra blankets to sweat out the illness. Hot stones from the hearth were placed at their feet. Some placed bowls of steaming water mixed with herbs beside the bed to cleanse the air. Others burned incense in hopes of driving away harmful spirits. Medical knowledge was limited, but care was given with sincerity. The sick often rested near the fire, with family members taking turns watching over them during long nights. Winter illnesses added a quiet tension to the season. Every cough, every shiver brought concern, but most recovered with rest and warmth, thanks to constant attention and small comforts. The community understood that patience was as important as any remedy, and that healing was a slow process best supported by calm, steady presence. Monasteries became essential during winter months. Built of stone and better protected against the cold, these places offered shelter, food, and spiritual comfort. Monks followed strict routines regardless of weather. Morning prayers, reading scripture, copying manuscripts by candlelight. They tended herb gardens covered in frost, checking stored plants used for medicines. Travelers caught in storms sometimes knocked at monastery doors, seeking refuge. Monks provided warm broth, straw bedding, and a place by the fire. They also offered healing herbs and prayers for the sick. In harsh winters, monasteries occasionally distributed bread to nearby villages, their ovens working late into the night. Though quiet and disciplined, monastic life became a beacon of stability when the world outside was frozen and still. The sound of chanting echoing through stone halls provided comfort, a reminder that even in the darkest season, some things remained steady and unchanging. Life inside a medieval castle during winter was both privileged and difficult. The thick stone walls kept out wind but trapped cold, making rooms drafty and damp. Fires burned constantly in great halls, where the lord's household gathered for warmth. Servants carried firewood throughout the day, feeding the large hearths that glowed with orange light. Nobles wore heavy fur-lined cloaks and ate meals of hot stews and bread. Music and storytelling filled the hall during long evenings, while tapestries on the walls helped insulate rooms. However, castle towers and private chambers were bitterly cold. Water froze in pitchers, and breath hung in the air like smoke. Guards patrolled the snowy battlements, stamping their feet to stay warm. Horses in the stable were blanketed and fed extra grain. Though castles appeared strong and imposing, winter revealed their vulnerability. Yet inside these walls, people found ways to adapt. Through shared fires, shared meals, shared stories, and endured winter with quiet resilience. Traveling in winter was risky, and most avoided it unless absolutely necessary. Roads became icy and treacherous. Snow hid dangerous holes and uneven ground. Wild animals came closer to villages searching for food, making forests more hazardous. Travelers carried thick cloaks, flint stones for fire, and small food pouches with dried meat or bread. If caught in a storm, finding shelter became a race against nightfall. Some rested beneath pine trees, using branches as makeshift covers. Others found abandoned sheds or barns. Inns along main roads provided warm meals and straw beds, but reaching them required courage and careful planning. Most medieval people preferred to stay within familiar boundaries during winter, valuing safety over adventure. Only messengers, monks, or urgent traders braved the silent roads. Travel in winter reminded everyone just how powerful the season could be, shaping not only landscapes, but decisions and lives. Despite the hardships, winter was not without joy. Villages celebrated small festivals that brought light to dark days. Candles were lit in windows to symbolize hope during the longest nights. Families prepared simple feasts using saved treats, honey cakes, roasted nuts, or dried apples. Children played in the snow, shaping small figures or sliding down hills on wooden boards. Music echoed through cottages as neighbors gathered to share stories. Some festivals honored the turning of the year, welcoming the sun's slow return. Priests held services of gratitude, reminding people that winter, too, had purpose. These moments, though modest, lifted spirits. Winter joy was different from summer joy. It was quieter, softer, found in laughter around a small fire or in the warmth of shared company. These celebrations strengthened community bonds and offered comfort when days were short and nights long. Midwinter brought the harshest nights. Temperatures dropped so low that even well-built homes felt brittle with cold. Frost painted walls in intricate patterns. Water in wooden buckets froze solid. People woke with numb fingers despite sleeping close together. Fires needed constant tending. Someone always rose before dawn to stir embers and add dry logs. Food supplies dwindled, making meals simpler and portions smaller. Outside, animals huddled together, and forests stood silent beneath heavy layers of snow. Yet midwinter also held a strange beauty. Moonlight sparkled on frozen fields. Trees glistened with ice. The air felt still and clear, as if the world held its breath. Midwinter tested strength, but also deepened appreciation for the smallest comforts. A warm bowl of stew, a thick wool blanket, the glow of firelight reflected in watchful eyes. During winter, medieval villagers depended on each other more than at any other time. Wood was shared when a neighbor's supply ran low. Families exchanged food when illness prevented someone from cooking. Children carried messages between homes, their footprints marking narrow paths through snow. When storms trapped people indoors, villagers checked on one another once the winds calmed. Helping others was not just kindness, it was survival. Collective effort kept the community functioning. Men gathered to repair a collapsed roof or dig out a frozen well. Women took turns grinding grain or preparing large batches of stew. The village was a network of quiet support, strengthened by necessity. Winter reminded everyone that life was fragile and that no one endured the season alone. These bonds, formed in hardship, often lasted into warmer months, shaping the social fabric of the entire year. Winter changed the way sound moved through the medieval world. Snow absorbed noise, creating an unusual stillness. Voices seemed softer, footsteps muted. The crackling of a hearth fire became a central sound of daily life. The distant caw of a raven carried farther through crisp air. Church bells rang sharply, their chimes cutting through silence before fading into the white distance. Wind howled differently, slipping between wooden walls or whistling through the edges of shutters. Inside homes, the rhythmic turning of a spinning wheel, the steady chopping of vegetables, and the gentle tapping of weaving tools formed a quiet winter soundtrack. Even the simple act of pouring water made a dull, heavy sound because of the cold. Winter reshaped not only landscapes, but the very atmosphere, reminding people of nature's power to alter everything, even the sounds that defined their world. Nights stretched endlessly in winter, lasting up to 14 hours. Families adapted by creating routines to pass the dark time peacefully. After supper, children gathered near the fire while adults recited old stories, legends of heroes, cautionary tales, and memories of ancestors. Some nights were devoted to simple tasks, mending torn clothing, carving wooden spoons, or sorting dried herbs. Candles burned slowly, illuminating the room with warm yellow light. Sleep came in two segments, an early first sleep, followed by a period of quiet wakefulness, then a second sleep until morning. During that middle period, people prayed softly, whispered dreams, or tended embers. Long nights encouraged introspection and calm. Without daylight or work to distract them, Medieval families moved at a slower pace, accepting darkness as a natural part of the season's rhythm. Winter storms arrived with little warning. Sky darkened rapidly, winds shifted, and snow began to fall in thick, swirling curtains. Villagers hurried indoors, securing shutters with wooden bars. Animals were brought close, and barns reinforced with extra straw against the cold wind. Inside, families listened as the storm raged. Snowflakes beat softly against thatched roofs. Wind moaned through chimneys. Trees creaked under weight. Storms could last hours or days, isolating villages completely. Paths vanished, and doors froze shut. After the storm, children helped adults shovel snow away from entrances. Damage was assessed: collapsed roofs, broken branches, frozen wells. Storms were frightening, but they also slowed the world to a peaceful halt. When the sky finally cleared, sunlight sparkled on fresh snow, creating a breathtaking stillness that made even the coldest days feel momentarily magical. Rivers froze solid during especially cold winters, transforming into new pathways. People cautiously tested the ice with poles before stepping onto it. Once declared safe, frozen rivers became smooth, silent roads connecting distant settlements. Children slid along the surface, laughing softly in the cold air. Fishermen cut holes with axes to catch fish beneath the ice, lowering nets or simple hooks. Some villagers traveled across frozen lakes to visit relatives or gather supplies from nearby hamlets. But the ice was unpredictable. Cracks formed silently. Travelers listened for deep, echoing groans, signs that the river might not hold. Frozen waterways made travel easier yet riskier. Still, they represented winter's strange dual nature: beauty and danger intertwined, offering new possibilities while demanding respect. Poorer families struggled most during winter. Their supplies were limited, and their homes poorly insulated. Meals consisted mostly of thin broths, dark bread, and whatever vegetables had survived storage. Sometimes meals were flavored only with salt or onion skins. When food shortages grew severe, families boiled wild herbs or made simple cakes from ground acorns. Hunger taught resourcefulness. Nothing was wasted. Bones were boiled repeatedly to extract every bit of flavor. Stale bread was softened with hot water. Families shared food in small portions, hoping to stretch supplies until spring. Despite these hardships, there was a quiet dignity in how people accepted their circumstances. Winter taught humility and perseverance, reminding everyone that survival often depended on patience, cooperation, and faith. Fire was not simply warmth, it was life itself. The hearth served as the home's center for cooking, light, and comfort. Maintaining fire required constant attention. Children were taught early how to safely tend embers, blowing gently to keep them alive. When fires burned too low, adults used flint and steel to ignite new sparks. Firewood stored during autumn was guarded carefully. Damp wood filled homes with smoke, so dry logs were used sparingly, save for the coldest nights. Sparks from the hearth were dangerous, especially in homes with thatched roofs. Many households kept buckets of sand nearby as a simple fire safety measure. Around the hearth, families gathered not only for warmth but for companionship. It was where stories were told, meals cooked, and prayers whispered. Fire transformed winter from unbearable cold into a season of intimate moments. Winter clothing in the medieval world was entirely practical. Wool was the most important material. Heavy cloaks, tunics, and leggings all made from thick, hand-spun fibers. Cloaks were pinned at the shoulder with simple brooches. Mittens were rare, but fingerless gloves allowed people to work while keeping hands warm. Children wore multiple linen underlayers beneath woolen outer garments. Fur linings, though valuable, were reserved for the wealthy. Hoods made from layered cloth protected faces from biting winds. Shoes were stuffed with straw for insulation. When snow soaked through outer layers, garments were hung near the fire to dry overnight. Clothes were patched repeatedly, sometimes showing decades of careful repairs. Winter fashion was not about appearance, but preservation. Each garment represented hours of labor, every stitch contributing to survival in a world where cold held real danger. Forests transformed dramatically during winter. Trees stood tall and bare, their branches etched against pale skies. Snow covered the undergrowth, muffling every sound. Hunters ventured into forests cautiously, tracking the faint footprints of deer or hares. Woodcutters traveled in small groups, chopping fallen branches for firewood. Wolves, drawn by hunger, roamed closer to villages, their howls echoing through frosty air. Birds migrated or fell silent, leaving forests eerily still. Yet forests also offered protection. Pine groves shielded travelers from icy winds. Fallen logs served as resting spots. The forest silence carried a strange beauty, each breath forming small clouds in the crisp air, each step sinking softly into untouched snow. Winter forests reminded people of nature's vastness and their own vulnerability. Life in a manor house differed from that in cottages, yet winter hardships still reached inside. Lords and their families had larger fires, better insulation, and more servants, but the cold still seeped through thick stone walls. Great halls hosted meals with roasted meats and warm wine, offering a sense of abundance. Servants, however, worked tirelessly, carrying wood, maintaining fires, fetching water, and serving meals. The manor buzzed with controlled activity. Children played near tapestries, listening to minstrels perform soft tunes. Ladies of the house spent evenings weaving or playing board games. The lord met with stewards to plan spring planting or discuss repairs. Despite its wealth, the manor felt enclosed, surrounded by deep snow and silent fields. Winter equalized people in subtle ways. Everyone felt the cold, and everyone awaited the arrival of spring. Winter stretched time in unusual ways. Days blended together in long sequences of chores, meals, and quiet evenings. Without planting or harvesting, there was less urgency. People slept more, talked more, and worked indoors at a gentler pace. Time was measured not by clocks, but by the changing light, the amount of firewood remaining, and the slow growth of icicles along rooftops. Weeks passed with little change, giving winter a dreamlike quality. Even festivals felt muted compared to the lively months of summer. Yet this slowness had its own charm. It allowed families to reconnect, to reflect on the past year, and to plan for spring. Winter reminded people that life moved in cycles, and that restful seasons were as important as active ones. Winter carried dangers beyond storms and hunger. Frostbite, though not named as such, was well known. Fingers and toes numbed quickly during outdoor tasks. People warmed their hands over fires as soon as they returned inside. Children were warned not to linger outdoors without gloves or hoods. Hypothermia, too, though misunderstood, claimed lives quietly. Elders were especially vulnerable, their bodies weakened by age. Even inside homes, cold drafts could chill people during the night. To prevent this, families slept close together and added extra straw beneath blankets for insulation. Homes were checked regularly for leaks that allowed wind to creep in. Cold was a constant enemy, silent, creeping, and tireless. But medieval villagers learned to recognize its signs and defend against it with diligence. Winter affected not only the body but the mind. Long nights and limited activity brought quiet feelings of loneliness or melancholy. Medieval people had no word for seasonal depression, but they understood the heaviness that accompanied dark months. To lift spirits, families held small gatherings or shared stories filled with humor and warmth. Priests offered comforting sermons about endurance and renewal. Mothers taught children simple crafts to keep them occupied. Some individuals found peace in routine, cutting wood, tending the fire, or preparing daily meals. Others found comfort in prayer or contemplation. Winter's emotional weight was real, yet communities fought it with togetherness, reminding each other of spring's eventual return. As winter's grip loosened subtly, people watched for the earliest signs of change. Snow melted slowly along the edges of roads. Icicles dripped rhythmically from eaves. Birds returned with faint morning calls. Livestock grew restless, sensing warmer days ahead. Families opened shutters more often, letting in pale sunlight that had been absent for months. Children looked for the first green shoots beneath melting snow. Though cold remained, hope grew quietly. People repaired tools in anticipation of spring planting. The village began to stir with renewed energy. Winter was not over, but its end could be felt, soft, distant, but approaching. The final days of winter carried a unique stillness. Snow remained in patches, but the sun hung longer in the sky. Frozen rivers cracked loudly as ice began to break apart. Families used the last of their firewood piles, knowing new wood would soon be available. Food stores ran low, but the promise of spring eased fear. Paths turned muddy as snow melted, marking the transition between seasons. These final days encouraged reflection. People looked back on the challenges they had overcome, the storms, the shortages, the long nights, and felt a quiet pride. Survival through winter was not a dramatic victory, but a gradual, patient endurance. And as the earth softened and birds returned, the medieval world prepared to breathe again. Winter's weight lifted, making space for renewed life and the vibrant season waiting just beyond the melting snow. The first true stirrings of spring were subtle. Snow no longer fell, but patches of white still lingered stubbornly in shaded corners. The ground, long stiff and silent, began to soften beneath boots. When villagers stepped outside, they noticed the faint scent of damp earth, a smell absent for months. Water dripped steadily from rooftops, forming small streams that wound through muddy paths. Children followed these streams with sticks, watching them twist and merge like tiny rivers. Women opened windows to air out homes that had been sealed tight against winter's chill. The breeze carried both cold and promise. Men tested tools that had been repaired throughout the winter, checking handles for cracks and blades for sharpness. The sound of birdsong returned gently, filling mornings with unfamiliar brightness. Cattle were led from barns for brief walks, their hooves squelching in thawing mud. Though the world was still cold, villagers felt a shift within themselves, an instinctive recognition that winter's longest grip had finally begun to ease. Work would soon increase, but for now, people cherished the delicate balance between seasons, savoring each small sign of renewal. Before planting could begin, the land needed to be awakened. Fields that had slept beneath layers of snow were inspected for damage. Fallen branches were gathered, rocks removed, and the soil broken apart with wooden plows. Villagers worked methodically, aware that spring's early days were unpredictable. Rain might soften the ground too much, while late frost could undo delicate progress. Teams of oxen pulled plows through damp earth, their steady steps guided by farmers who knew every inch of their land. Women scattered ashes from winter fires across the fields to enrich the soil. Children helped by collecting stones and stacking them along the edges. The air filled with the earthy scent of turned soil, a smell that brought relief after the sterile cold of winter. Work began slowly but grew more urgent as days lengthened. Everyone felt the importance of these tasks. A successful planting season meant security for the rest of the year. A poor one meant hardship. Spring's energy pulsed through the village, transforming cold stillness into careful, hopeful movement. Weeks passed before the first sprouts appeared. Tiny green shoots pierced the soil, delicate yet determined. Families visited the fields daily, checking for signs of growth. These early plants were more than crops. They were symbols of survival after a long, oppressive winter. Rain fell gently, nourishing the fragile sprouts. Birds swooped overhead, searching for worms drawn to the moist earth. Farmers protected the seedlings by placing woven fences around them to keep animals away. Children were warned not to run too close, for a single careless step could crush days of growth. At home, women planted herb gardens near their cottages, marking rows of mint, parsley, and sage. The scent of fresh herbs signaled a shift in daily meals, promising flavors that had been absent since autumn. While work increased, spirits lifted. Even the elders, stiff from months of cold, ventured outside longer each day to feel sunlight warming their faces. Spring was still young, but its presence filled the village with quiet optimism. Winter left behind marks that needed attention. Cottages showed cracked plaster, loose thatch, and swollen wooden beams. Villagers worked together to repair roofs using bundles of straw, climbing carefully to patch holes where snow had seeped inside. Stone walls were inspected for frost damage. Missing mortar was replaced with fresh mixtures. Barn doors, warped from moisture, were reinforced. Fences around fields needed mending to keep animals from wandering. Tools were sharpened once more, and buckets used for carrying water were tightened with new wooden rings. Even roads showed signs of strain. Deep ruts filled with melting snow had to be smoothed by spreading gravel. These repairs were not dramatic, but essential. Every completed task restored a sense of normalcy. Through patient labor, the village slowly emerged from winter's harsh grip, strengthened by the knowledge that they had endured the worst and could rebuild piece by piece. With warmer days, the marketplace reopened. Merchants traveled from nearby villages, bringing goods that had been scarce for months. Fresh cloth dyed in earthy tones, pottery with new patterns, iron tools, and bundles of dried herbs. Villagers brought their own contributions, woven baskets, repaired tools, and early spring vegetables. The once quiet square filled with soft chatter, the clinking of coins, and the smell of warm bread baked for the occasion. Children marveled at small trinkets, while elders traded stories about how winter had treated their families. Though trade was modest, its presence signaled renewal. Market days reminded villagers of connections beyond their small world, ties that winter often made them forget. The marketplace became a symbol of reawakening, bringing movement, color, and energy after months of stillness. As spring strengthened, fires burned less frequently. Families let hearths die down during the day, keeping only small flames alive for cooking. Heavy cloaks were hung on pegs, no longer needed at every moment. Homes were swept thoroughly to remove soot accumulated over the winter months. The smell of smoke faded from clothing, replaced by the fresh scent of open air. People spent more time outdoors, warm enough to sit in the sun while repairing fishing nets or carving new wooden bowls. Fire, once a constant companion, stepped quietly back into the background of daily life. Though still essential, it no longer dominated the rhythm of the home. The shift was subtle but deeply felt, marking the end of winter's close, protective circle and the beginning of a season filled with openness and renewal. The first warm rain arrived unexpectedly. Thick clouds rolled across the sky, and a gentle downpour began, filling the air with the earthy scent of wet soil. Unlike winter storms, this rain brought relief rather than fear. Villagers stepped outside to feel droplets on their skin, letting the moisture wash away winter's heaviness. Rain collected in barrels, providing fresh water for cooking and cleaning. Children splashed in puddles, their laughter echoing across the village. Farmers welcomed the rain, knowing it nourished their newly planted fields. Even animals seemed livelier, trotting in mud-softened pastures. The warm rain marked a turning point. The land, long hardened by cold, softened completely. New life stirred not just in the soil, but in the minds of everyone who had endured months of darkness. Spring had finally and undeniably arrived. To honor the season's return, villagers held a modest celebration. A simple garland of flowers decorated the church door. Women prepared meals using the first fresh herbs of the year, mixing them into stews that tasted brighter than anything eaten during winter. Music drifted from the village square, flutes carved during long nights finally played in open air. Dances were small but heartfelt, performed cautiously on soft ground. Children carried baskets of violets and early blossoms, scattering petals along pathways. The celebration was not extravagant. Medieval life rarely allowed such luxury, but its purpose was deeper, to acknowledge survival. After months of cold, scarcity, and stillness, the village came together not just to welcome spring, but to express gratitude for enduring winter's long shadow. With roads clear of snow and mud drying in the sun, travel resumed. Messengers who had been confined by winter weather carried letters to neighboring settlements. Traders returned to their routes, bringing news of distant places. Some villagers visited relatives they had not seen for months, crossing bridges once frozen solid. Inns reopened fully, offering warm meals and a place to rest for those journeying between towns. The world, which winter had made small and isolated, expanded once again. Travel brought new opportunities, alliances, trade exchanges, and stories from faraway lands. Though medieval life remained modest, spring restored a sense of connection and movement that winter always threatened to erase. Winter often separated people physically and emotionally, but spring brought a renewed sense of community. Neighbors who had seen each other only briefly during cold months now worked side by side in fields. Families visited one another, sharing meals and recounting winter challenges. The churchyard became a gathering place again, filled with conversations after Sunday prayers. Children formed new groups to explore forests and streams. Social life blossomed quietly, reinforcing bonds essential for survival throughout the year. Winter's isolation slowly dissolved, replaced by laughter, shared work, and renewed friendships. Community, once compressed into small, dimly lit rooms, expanded into open spaces warmed by sunlight. with melting snow and increased rainfall. Ensuring clean water became critical. Wells were inspected and cleared of debris that had accumulated during winter. Streams were checked for contamination from runoff. Families cleaned water barrels thoroughly, scrubbing the insides to remove algae and sediment. Herbalists taught children how to boil water for safety, especially when floods made it cloudy. Clean water was essential for cooking, washing, and irrigating small gardens. The renewed flow of spring water symbolized purity and rebirth, reminding villagers of the natural cycle connecting winter's dormancy with spring's awakening. Every drop was treated with care, for water could sustain life or bring illness, depending on how it was used. As grass began to grow, livestock returned to open fields. Sheep grazed eagerly on fresh shoots, their winter coats thick and tangled. Cows, thrilled to leave cramped barns, moved slowly across pastures, their bells ringing softly. Horses stretched stiff muscles as farmers led them to larger grazing areas. Pigs rooted in thawed soil, sniffing for roots and insects. The return of animals to pastures was a sign of stability. The sounds of grazing, bleating, and soft hoofbeats brought life back to landscapes silent for months. Farmers carefully watched for signs of illness after the long winter and adjusted feeding routines accordingly. The sight of healthy animals scattered across green fields reassured everyone that the hardest season was truly behind them. With outdoor work resuming, craftsmen grew busier. Blacksmiths sharpened blades dulled by firewood cutting and repaired hinges weakened by cold. Carpenters built new plowshares or reinforced wagon wheels damaged by frost. Potters shaped new clay jars to replace those cracked in icy cellars. Even simple tools like wooden bowls and ladles were sanded smooth or remade entirely. This flurry of craftsmanship restored the village's efficiency. Tools were the backbone of medieval survival, and their renewal marked a return to normal production. Work was steady and satisfying, fueled by fresh air and longer daylight hours. Winter had slowed hands, but spring revived their purpose. Although spring had arrived, danger lingered. A sudden frost could destroy fragile crops overnight. Farmers watched the sky carefully, noting the color of clouds at dusk, the sharpness of the wind, and the smell of the air. If frost threatened, families covered seedlings with straw or cloth, hoping to protect them from the cold. Some lit small fires in fields at night, believing the smoke would shield young plants. These efforts did not always succeed, but they reflected the village's deep respect for nature's unpredictability. Winter was gone, but its voice still whispered through cool evenings, reminding everyone not to take warmth for granted. Spring affected the mind as deeply as the land. People felt lighter, more hopeful. After months of confinement, the openness of fields and the brightness of sunlight lifted spirits naturally. Laughter returned more easily. Songs were sung more often. Even work felt different, less burdensome, more purposeful. Children ran freely, exploring areas they had avoided during winter. Elders sat outside longer, sharing stories passed through generations. The heaviness winter brought slowly dissolved, replaced by anticipation for upcoming harvests, festivals, and long warm days. Spring was not only a season but an emotional renewal, transforming how medieval people viewed themselves, their neighbors, and their future. As spring matured, the village prepared for its first major festival of the year. Women gathered flowers and braided them into long garlands. Men erected wooden poles decorated with ribbons. Families prepared special meals using ingredients finally available after months of scarcity: fresh green vegetables, early berries, and even small portions of preserved meat saved for important occasions. Children practiced dances taught by older villagers. Musicians tuned simple instruments made during winter. The festival symbolized gratitude for surviving winter and hope for a prosperous year. Preparations built excitement, and even those who rarely showed emotion felt a quiet thrill. The village was coming alive again, in celebration rather than survival. Spring cleaning extended beyond individual homes. It included the entire village. Roads were cleared of debris revealed by melting snow. Wells were reinforced and swept clean. The churchyard was tidied, with weeds removed and pathways repaired. Barns were organized, tools categorized after months of storage. Animal pens were cleaned thoroughly for the first time since winter began. Waste piles were moved farther from homes to reduce illness. The process was communal, involving everyone from children to elders. With each cleaned space, winter's lingering shadow faded. The village felt transformed, lighter, healthier, and ready to embrace the coming seasons. Eventually, the first truly warm day arrived, a day when the sun felt strong enough to be felt deep in the skin. Coats were left indoors, windows stayed wide open, and doors remained unlatched to let fresh air pass freely. Children played near streams swollen with melted snow. Women washed winter clothing in large wooden tubs, letting garments dry on bushes under the sun. Men removed heavy shutters from windows and stored them for next winter. The warm day felt like a reward for endurance, a gift that made every hardship worthwhile. Even evening held a gentle warmth, allowing families to sit outside longer, listening to frogs and distant bird calls. It was the kind of day medieval people remembered all year. As spring settled fully, villagers looked back on winter not with bitterness, but with quiet pride. They remembered the storms, the long nights, the shortages, and the resilience that carried them through. Winter had tested their patience, strength, and unity. It had reshaped their routines and reminded them of life's fragility. But it had also deepened bonds, strengthened traditions, and taught them to value simple comforts. Reflection came naturally in warm spring evenings, when families sat outside sharing memories of the cold season. Winter was harsh, yet it had passed. What remained was not misery, but gratitude. Spring finally took full hold of the land. Fields shimmered with young crops. Trees burst with blossoms, filling the air with soft fragrances. Livestock grazed contentedly, and bees hummed as they visited new flowers. The cold, dark months felt distant, almost unreal, replaced by bright mornings and warm breezes. Villagers moved through their days with renewed purpose, planting, building, trading, and preparing for the year ahead. Winter had shaped them, but spring defined them. The medieval world, once buried in snow and silence, now pulsed with life. And though winter would eventually return, its presence no longer felt overwhelming. For now, there was warmth, light, and the promise of abundant days. Spring was not simply a change in weather, it was a reminder that endurance brings renewal, and that even the harshest seasons give way to hope. And now, as our long walk through medieval winter comes to an end, let the snow-covered roads, the quiet forests, and the warm flicker of hearth fires fade gently into the background. You've wandered through cold nights, waited out silent storms, felt the stillness of the frozen world, and you've watched spring return with its soft, steady promise of renewal. There is nothing more you need to do. No more chores, no more long nights, no more cold winds. Only rest. Let the last embers of the medieval hearth glow softly in your mind. Let your breath fall into a slow, peaceful rhythm. Let the world darken gently around you, inviting you into deep, quiet sleep. The winter is behind you now. The night is warm, and you are safe.